run it past you because some things you said related to this, and um, so the idea is this: product management hasn't been that present in what we would call like double AAA game development. It's starting to get a foothold. I think Riot was actually a bit strange because they had it, except they didn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't actually product management. It was kind of product management, but it was still it had a unique twist on it. But that idea of we've got somebody who's thinking about the problem space and the opportunity. Um, Historically, in game development, that's just been the designer. The designer's the person, like whoever the creative lead is, or somebody like that is like, hey, I'm the one who does that. And someone you both know, Omar, he kind of described it as like the product manager is the person who defines the problem space, and the designer is the one who solves the problem space, right? And then understand that delta. And some people can do both, but you want to say something?
No, no, no.
He's smirking.
I'm just smirking because Omar and I similarly have worked together for a very long time, and I think he's one of the smartest guys in games. And he and I have just had that conversation with so many product like junior product folks over the
Yeah.
years of like, hey, no, here's how to think about it. And I'm just going back to a conversation with a bunch of game directors where Omar was presenting that concept to a bunch of the game directors at Phoenix, and many of the game directors came from a design background and had a really hard time
Oh
kind of
yeah, yeah.
shifting their mindset from being problem solvers to being problem creators.
Yes, or identifiers maybe. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think that so perhaps then this is relevant. So that I have this theory then. Why didn't we have product management? And I think it was for a long time video games were a wild west, and it was like the only way I almost imagine is you're throwing darts at like the relatively blue ocean, and you've
Mm.
got a decent shot of kind of like, oh, that one kind of landed, that one, excuse my mixed metaphor, but like that one worked, okay, that one, oh, that one didn't work. And what's interesting is we have a counterexample in mobile where product management became huge very quickly, and I would also argue that mobile became a red ocean much more quickly than PC console. And so I think we had product managers there because they were like trying to carve out the spot of blue in the landscape. And in PC console, we just didn't do that. We didn't need that because it was sort of like, yeah, but if we've got, somebody who has a cool idea for a game, let's just go ahead and try to make that thing and see what happens. And now I think we're actually starting to hit that saturation where the PC console world is also becoming hyper-saturated. Again, 2014, we're talking about underserved markets, and it's like novel. And
Hmm.
and now it's everywhere.
There,
19,000
there
new
aren't
games released on Steam
really
or
any
whatever.
underserved audiences anymore. So it's
Yeah, or if they are,
every gaming audience is being served.
right. And by the way, it's like if you were to go and tell someone, well, I think I found an underserved audience, everybody's gonna be like, did you? Yeah, you did you? You found that? It's just like you said, and not only are they being served, they're being served by lifestyle games.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and so there's this additional complexity in that idea of like product thinking. And what I heard you describing as you were walking through the difference between Phoenix in 2014 and today is this evolution of product thinking as a concept related to video games, where I would argue that we're still pretty darned immature at that. Outside of, again, spaces like mobile where they're almost too advanced at that, maybe. But we're having to catch up almost to the world.
I think there's a number of factors, like historical factors, that limited the ability to create, call it full life cycle product thinking. If you think again, you go to the early 2000s, to like 2010, 2012 timeframe, publishing generally was not even geographically in the same place as development.
Mm-hmm.
So, your R&D efforts would be kicked off, depending on the company that you work for. Like if we use the Call of Duty example, and I didn't work on Call of Duty, so I'm kind of postulating a little bit, but like in that time frame, you had three different studios, each working on a different Call of Duty game, but being published by a central publishing entity, none of which worked in the same office.
Right.
So you had four different groups building stuff, and who knows if Treyarch and Sledgehammer were talking, let alone if the product guy or gal in the kind of marketing side was thinking about, who the product marketing manager rather was thinking about, like anything kind of in the holistic. So you end up getting this like call it phasic handoff of like somebody comes in and says, hey, I want to make this game, and I need a dev team to do it, and or vice versa. Hey, I want to make this game, and I need a publisher to sell it. And those two groups were, one creating the market and the acquisition and like or the purchase intent, and the other one actually developing the asset that is to be sold. And like those two rarely spoke. If they did, it was generally at a very, very like controlled manner, often in a boardroom or through very specific publishing producers, right? And those kind of entities, like people that the publisher would hire that spoke like developer-ese, and vice versa. You often had a like one of my jobs at BioWare was to speak. I had been at EA prior to being at BioWare, so I knew how to like speak EAEs, and I got like sent to Redwood Shores so often that I ended up having to get a work visa because the U.S. wouldn't let me in anymore. I've been there so often to go and like connect with the marketing team.
And by the way, I'll just call out too, I think this led to that animosity we see today between these two, like this sort of one to end to one sort of,
And I think a lot of that, having lived that experience, at Ubi and EA, I think a lot of that came though from a lack of communication and therefore trust. And then so when mistakes happened, as they always do, it became an us them thing rather than a collective thing. And so what I think was really interesting about what we did at Riot, when and I was kind of there from that transition. I was originally hired as a producer and became a product manager, right? And what we had that no one else had at the time was embedded publishing. Like as when we thought about running League, remember, like it was like myself, Chris Enoch, and David Banks collectively, try to look at the whole picture to the point where we literally sat, with Enoch being the head of like marketing and publishing, and Banks being the head of technology, and myself being kind of the tie that binds, right, and the kind of the design and product vision side of the equation. And so like, it was really interesting, and what we saw a ton of value because from the moment that the player heard about League to the moment that they left the ecosystem, the leadership team was thinking about. And that was really unique in those days. And I think still is relatively unique today.
Yeah.
And I think your point in mobile, if you're not thinking like that, you've already lost. Because the loops are so tight, right? Like you only have one or two ad impressions to hook a player and to understand what they like. And then you had better get them stuck because the cost of leaving the ecosystem is functionally zero for a mobile player, right? Like there's so many other games, and like they're so fast to download, they're so quick to get into that like if you don't hook your player like this, like you're out. And I think to your point on the AAA side or the PC console side, the fact that you have to download a multi-gig game and generally often have to buy it, or there's like a long tutorial process, and the games tend to be a little bit more complex. That's not a universal thing. Like the Genshins of the world exist, so like I recognize that. But
there were more kind of moats around player and the rapidity of the movement between. So
I think that those are not safe moats. Those are not moats that were built with an explicit strategy in mind.
Accidental.
Right? Like, cool, my internet pipe isn't fat enough and Unreal, assets took 15 gigs to download. I guess that's a moat. But like, that's not a good
it's more like, hey, England happens to be an island and that was very beneficial to it over the course of history. But it wasn't like anybody was like, we should really settle on an island. It was just like, this is where we ended up, right? So,
right? Totally.
So, okay.